Shabbat Shalom. I'm Cantor David Proser from Kempsville Conservative Synagogue, Kehillat Bet HaMidrash in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And this is our Torah commentary for Shabbat of August 24th, 2020, corresponding to the 6th day of the Hebrew month of Mar Cheshvan 5781. We thank Rabbi Joseph Prauser, Rabbi Adam Rosenbaum, and the United Synagogue Torah Sparks series for their various teachings and publications on this week's Parsha. This Shabbat, October 24th, we move on to the Parsha of Noah, the second Parsha in the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. It begins on page 41 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 26 of the Hertz. As Rabbi Joseph Prauser explains, using an unforgettable pun, Parshat Noach represents a watershed moment in humanity's moral evolution. Individual human beings and society as a whole are subject to moral standards that represent God's will and expectations for the world. Loyalty to those standards determines whom God will favor and what nations God will choose to carry out his divine plan. In this week's Parsha, we learn that God was disappointed with the way our world was unfolding and so decided to make a fresh start. Human society had grown so corrupt that God decreed its utter destruction by a flood. Noah, who is considered to be remarkable for his moral stature, is God's last hope for humanity. He is commanded to build an ark in which to carry his family and 2 of every animal on earth to facilitate repopulation of the world after the flood. Noah, his wife, his sons, and daughters-in-law board the ark, which he constructed at God's direction. 40 days of rain ensue, with Noah, his family, and all the animals on board. The rest of humanity and animal life are destroyed by the flood. The rain stops. Noah sends a raven and then a dove to find signs of the reappearance of land. In time, the waters subside, the ark runs aground, and the passengers disembark. Noah offers sacrifices to God, who vows never again to unleash such a universal destructive force. God provides a rainbow as a sign of his vow, promising that the world would never again be destroyed by a flood. God imposes basic moral obligations on humanity, reflecting a revised, more restrained estimation of human potential. Subsequently, Noah plants a vineyard, cultivates its produce, makes wine, becomes intoxicated, sheds his clothing, and falls asleep in his tent. His son Ham, or in English, as it's translated, Ham, discovers this and tells his brothers Shem and Japhet, who do the right thing and cover up their father without looking at his nakedness. When Noah awakens and finds out what happens, he curses his son Ham and his descendants while blessing Shem and Japhet and their families for their respectful response to his drunken and vulnerable state. It should be noted that the Israelite nation descends from Shem. That is, we are Shemites, or more familiarly, Semites. More specifically, we descend from Shem's great-grandson Aver, perhaps the origin of the word Ivrit, meaning Hebrew. After the Torah compiles a genealogical summary, it relates the story of the Tower of Babel. A group of people attempt to build a tower to reach the heavens, in an effort to become all-powerful and make a great name for themselves. God foils this attempt by giving each person a different language to speak, thus confounding the project. 10 more generations come and go, culminating in our introduction to Avram, who accompanies his father Terach, his wife Sarai, and his nephew Lot as they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans for the land of Canaan, but first stopping and settling in Haran. Before I get to the Haftorah for this week, which is from the book of Isaiah, I need to give a correction from last week. If you watched last week's video, hopefully you also looked at the note in the comments where I made the connection. Rather than reading from the book of Isaiah last week, the Haftorah that would normally go with the Parsha of Bereshit, the calendar dictated our Haftorah for last week. Last week's Shabbat was the day before Rosh Chodesh, and so the proper Haftorah, the one that was read last Shabbat, was a Haftorah known as Machar Chodesh. It's from the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 20, verses 18 to 42. It tells of the parting of the future King David and his friend Jonathan, son of King Saul. The incident happens the day before Rosh Chodesh, and the words Machar Chodesh are in the first sentence of the text. Vayomer lo Yehonatan Machar Chodesh. And he said to Jonathan on the day before the new month, thus linking any Shabbat that falls the day before a Rosh Chodesh to the reading of the Haftorah known as Machar Chodesh. This week, the Haftorah is from the book of Isaiah, verses 54:1 to 55:5, beginning on page 65 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 41 of the Hertz. In the words of Dr. Hertz, this Haftorah, like the preceding one, forms a portion of a glowing prophetic rhapsody, Israel Redeemed, which is the main theme of the second half of the book of Isaiah. Isaiah employs metaphors on several layers. He speaks of the exiled nation of Israel as a woman unable to have children, stranded in despair, but about to be redeemed. He's prophesizing to the exiled nation of Israel, telling them to be ready because their redemption from the Babylonian exile will be imminent. He may also be addressing the land of Israel itself, saying, "Get ready, because we're coming back." The reference in verse 9 to the waters of Noah provide a literal connection with this week's Torah Parsha, but the connection is deeper. Even though the flood was an act of destruction that swept away a corrupt world, it paved the way for a new humanity. Similarly, Israel's exile and suffering will result in its coming back stronger in loyalty to God. God's covenant with Noah to never again destroy the world with a flood is paralleled by the covenant of peace into which Israel now enters. By comparing these similarities, Isaiah was drawing a comparison between the renewal of the earth after the flood and the prophesied return to Zion and the final, ultimate redemption of the Messiah and the world to come. The Haftorah ends on a note that is part prophecy and part command. A nation that you do not know will run to you for the sake of your God. One day the Jewish nation will be the inspiration for others, even nations who have never before met a Jew. Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos. As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe, to hit the like, and turn on the notifications so you'll always know when we post new content. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you again.